tell you when we are live now. So good morning, good evening, wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. We will wait a bit for the all people to get in. I can now see Richard, the live, on the phone. Guys, don't be distracted if I look down, because unfortunately the streaming tool StreamYard cannot integrate LinkedIn comments, so I need to look at my phone for your questions. Okay, so don't be like obsessed that I watch at the phone. It has a reason. Okay, so yeah, they are coming. Our guests are coming, so that's good. I now lost a bit, that connection. So go here. Post. And now I can see it. Yeah, I can see it. So we will wait a bit for the others, and then we will start. Guys, if those of you who are online, if you can ping me so I can see it on my phone that you are fine, that you can see us and you can hear us, that would be perfect. Richard, can you say a couple of words?
I'm here. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. If you guys can put down some comment and I can see it on my phone, that you can hear us, that would be perfect.
Just tell us how many fingers, and then we know you got us.
Okay. There are sorry, because my phone is kind of slow. It seems that it's all going, well. It's they are like saying that there's like 90 people, around 90 people on my phone. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start. My name is Jan Mühlfeit. I'm former chairman for Microsoft Europe, where I spent 22 years. I now do executive coaching. I coach also athletes. I coach some Olympic Games winners, but I coach also some celebrities. I wrote a bestseller called Positive Leader. It's about, what you can do with your life, how you can build self-awareness, and how happiness is driving success. I'll talk a bit later on about that. Based on that, we created with my dear friend Deepak Chopra online course called Positive Leader. I teach different courses, around the world, and obviously I speak. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you my dear friend from London. We are sitting in the different places today. I'm in Prague. Richard is in London. Richard Mcclane is a global vice chair of Dentons. Dentons is the world's largest law firm. The good thing with Richard is he spent like half of his career outside of the UK. He was running M&A, he was running client relationship in Dentons. He speaks French. Parlez-vous France?
Tout à fait. On peut le faire en français.
Not me. This is all I know from French. I was just teasing you. So he speaks a lot about, on strategy and innovation around the world. He is doing a lot of pro bono, and he is really high on diversity, inclusions, and so on, sitting in many advisory and charitable boards. And where are we really overlapping? He likes very much like growth mindset. And that's what we will talk about. Co-vision is basically what is the vision after COVID-11, because me and him, we see a lot of opportunities. So we call it opportunity from adversity. With no further ado, Richard, the digital floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Hello, everybody. Lovely to be talking to you. And as Jan said, if he's looking around a little bit at his phone, if I'm looking around a little bit, it's because my notes are printed all over my screen. So apologies, but I'm looking at you and talking to you. So let's kick off with the bad stuff, okay? Lots of people are gravely affected by this horrible disease, both personally and financially. And we're not, of course, wanting to belittle any of that today. What we want to do, though, is find a few reasons to be cheerful and how to cope with it. And we've been thinking about that, as I'm sure many of you have too. But, it's going to get worse before it gets better. The business and the economy are going to be a bit of a mess, as we know. There'll probably be a double dip also, as I'm sure a lot of us are thinking, because as it starts to get more optimistic as we come out, we'll then realize how much this is all going to cost us as economies, and down we go again before we come up. But there are some opportunities in that and some things that we can really learn from it. And that's what Jan and I want to talk about today. So lots of change, some of it temporary, some of it permanent. On the temporary side, some things are hurting, of course, very badly. Some industries are hurting very badly, but they're going to come back inevitably, right? Other things are going to arise as a result of what's happening right now, but then they will go away. Again, that might spell opportunity or something to learn from. So look, for example, let's just take silly examples, right? Number one, leisure, hospitality, yeah? Pubs, restaurants, hotels, we're going to eat out again. Yeah. We are going to take holidays again. Yeah. That industry in one way or another is going to come back. It's hurting terribly, but it's going to come back. And other things are just arising because of what's happening right now. So if you think of the last crisis, Lehman's, we had huge amounts of fraud occurring. People do desperate, naughty, silly, negligent things during crises. Think of Bernie Madoff. The reason he got found out is because the tide went out in the last financial economy. Think of the LIBOR scandal. That was done originally, who knows for what intentions, but ultimately it was fraud. Why? Because people were desperate at a certain time. Lots and lots of fraud is going to happen to lots of businesses during this time. And that will create huge seismic shifts, possibly a nudge for better governance and other things. But it is a finite window because it's something that arises because of what's happening and then will fade away until the next crisis, which will inevitably come, as we know.
Sure.
Yeah, and then finally, exactly, it's a cycle. Yeah,
absolutely.
And then we've got pockets of liquidity. That's an interesting one because Jan and I were talking about this yesterday. There are things like, there are countries where the crisis is ending earlier, possibly, than here. Take China, for example. They went in earlier, they came out earlier. Huge pockets of liquidity already there, which are going to arise as assets are still distressed in other places. And that's going to spell opportunity for them. Sovereign wealth, perhaps in the Middle East, other places where there are going to be pockets of liquidity that are going to take advantage of the distress. Again, lots of activity in the market, but with a finite shape to it. Belonging just to this crisis. So that's the first thing. What about more permanent things, less temporary and more permanent changes? That's what we're really interested in too. What can we learn from those? Because some things are more seismic. The tectonic plates are going to shift on a number of things, and we're going to move to what some people are now calling the new abnormal. Yeah, and whether that's bad or whether that's good depends on how quickly we identify those things that are going to change forever, where the toothpaste is truly out of the tube, and how quickly do we adapt to the fact that those things aren't going to go back to normal. So again, just taking some examples, random examples. If you think of air travel, for example, which is suffering horribly right now, as we know. The first thing to go, isn't it, in our businesses is the travel budget. Yeah. But look at us now. We're all interacting across the world perfectly well. Did we need to get on the plane? Now, I'm not saying...
Yeah, by the way, we have students from Imperial College, some students from Stanford, and INSEAD. There's a lot of people from INSEAD. So it's like, absolutely.
So
connected.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Stanford, for getting up so late in the night. That's one thing. That's one thing this crisis is not going to fix.
And they will watch it, record it. To be fair, but some people told me that they will be here, because it's like 9 hours difference, So.
Et bonjour et bienvenue, INSEAD. So, air travel. That's going to change. Maybe it's certainly not going to go back to how it was because we've all worked out we don't need to travel as much. But I'm talking right now to an airline about telepresence. Do they really still need to make those terribly thin margins or losses that they currently do on airline seats, even business ones, when people work out they don't really need to spend $5,000 to get to a meeting like this. As I say, I'm not saying you would have flown to see me, and but you know how sometimes you do have to go like 3 days, 5K, bunch of hotels to listen to someone for 1 hour, whatever it is, or have a meeting. Not necessary. We already knew that, but we weren't really nudged into making a change. And with the airlines having to change the way they do things, I think telepresence could be one of the things they look at, because the technology is here now in a way that it wasn't in the last crisis. So that's a seismic change, which I predict will happen. Airline branding, teleporting, like Star Trek.
So you can imagine, for example, Richard Branson in Virgin, because they are very innovative. So they may go this junction, right? They may say, hey, you know what? This is like low margin. Let's do this. Is that something? So that's what you think will happen?
I think there is a real chance that airlines will wake up to technology, because they make such tiny margins, and indeed many losses, trying to fly people around.
Like 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
Speed is the same, service is the same. Service is worse, by the way. Right.
Service
a year, so I know what I'm talking about for 15 years.
Service has definitely suffered because of it, and I think the margins in teleporting, ultimately, are huge. And I've talked to some of the telepresence businesses, and they price their model entirely on what is your business's travel budget. Okay, we'll give it to you for 20% less. So they make a lot of money, but those who serve it can make a huge margin out of that. So that's one other example of a permanent seismic change. Another thing, what about commercial real estate? Yeah. I mean, we already knew that Main Street, the high street, was dying, because we don't shop in shops anymore, obviously, right? And logistics is rising, we already knew that. But I would suggest that this is now going to be a huge nudge to the acceleration of that change. We have a program called Shops to Sheds. In other words, can you imagine Oxford Street in London no longer being full of shops, but being full of warehouses owned by Amazon? Because we still need those goods, but we just need them in a different way.
Good news for my wife. She likes to shop there when I live.
Well, the goods are still there, right? And
I need to tell her. Absolutely.
No, don't tell her. Just a suggestion. But commercial real estate, in terms of retail, definitely changing massively, and I think it'll accelerate massively. And we just worked out, haven't we? Don't really need offices. Look at us, right? Do we really need to commute all the way across town to an office to set up a screen and then do exactly what we're doing now? And certainly a lot of businesses, certainly businesses like mine and others, I'm sure, are going to say, we don't need all this real estate. We can hot desk it all, and we can cut down massively. And there's going to be a lot of spare real estate. That industry, just one another example, that's going to be accelerated into massive seismic change across the world. So there are just a few ideas on what will happen, possibly temporarily, permanently. Those are just little examples, but some will be temporary, some will be permanent, as always with crises. So the question I wanted us to think about is, how will this crisis be defined? If you look at the Lehman's crisis, the financial crisis, 2008 and 9, what really happened there to business models was that we were being asked to give more for less, weren't we? Remember that one? So
all industries, exactly.
So it would run down the supply chain, from upstream to downstream, from downstream to upstream. I've got to give less, you've got to give less. Give me more I've got to pay less, give me more, So what did we do with that? What we did is we squeezed some efficiencies out. We did some disaggregated service delivery models, didn't we? We found some cost certainty using a bit more data-driven tech.
Absolutely,
Yeah. We reduced our cost base a little bit so that people get a little bit more out of what we gave them, and vice versa. But I would suggest that we didn't really change our business models. People upstream were screaming for us to do it. We didn't really do it. We just found ways of improving our process and getting some efficiencies, but not fundamentally changing the business model. And I think, and it'd be interesting to discuss, that possibly the change on this crisis will be that the technology has moved on so much, and the shock, the economic shock from this one is going to be so enormous that those two things combined, are going to mean that we're actually going to change the way we do things, change our business models dramatically. Now, that's quite scary. That's also, depending on how you look at it, quite exciting. Yeah, because there are opportunities in that. And as ever, you know, the bigger the change, the bigger the opportunity. And we're going to have a less physical economy. We know that. Not completely, because you can't build an automobile by Zoom. I mean, you can robotically do quite a lot of it, but no, a lot of it you can't. You have to physically be there. But it's going to be a less physical economy, isn't it? So what are the reasons to be cheerful, at least for those of us who are lucky enough to be in service industries, or at least in service functions of industries? Because if you look at how we're working now, right, all of our businesses are really suffering. Yeah, mine is, yours is, suffering badly, and is going to suffer for a long time. But it's not because we're working from home or working next to the fridge or whatever we're doing. That's just the result of COVID. Yeah, but it's not because we're working from home that our businesses are suffering. We're really now just catching up, aren't we, on the advantages that were already there. And I want to look at some of those advantages and then we'll pass over to Jan on going deeper into that. So let's talk about interaction. You know, I would say that I've learned that the quality of interaction has net, certainly in my world, kind of improved. I mean, you can't replace face-to-face interaction, of course. But, you know, how much of that were we really doing? You know, we were already living through a screen. Yeah, look at our kids, obviously. The rest of us have become attached to screens. When we go to the office, the first thing we do, what do? We sit down on our desk, switch on a screen, look at the screen, email the person 2 offices down on the corridor, ring up the person upstairs. Did we actually see them? We didn't. So I'm thinking maybe this was already here and we could have been using it. So, and did we need all those expensive offices to be traveling several hours a week just to reconnect to those screens? So in fact, I would say video possibly has improved a lot of our interaction. You know, you can't interact successfully with a room of more than 20 people. Yeah. And there's no body language, is there, on a phone call, which is actually still, believe it or not, with all this technology we have, the way that most business is transacted. And a final point on interaction is political silos. Yeah. All of us who work in offices know that politics arise, and often, as we will know, politics often arise through physical segregation. You know, one floor stops trusting another floor. An office over in one part of the world doesn't see the other one enough, and silos arise. It's a well-known phenomenon. If we're just little boxes on the screen, if we're just little rectangles on the screen, as we are today, it's a great leveler. Everybody has equal voice. Everybody has equal value wherever they are. And I've certainly noticed, it'd be interesting to know what other people think. The change that this has had in how people feel engaged in the business, even though they're not face to face, it's actually, we're finding, very, very helpful to have everyone's equal screen value. Let's put it that way. And then just a couple of points to finish on reasons to be cheerful. I'm certainly seeing increased productivity. Don't know about everybody else, but you know, we've got our commuting time back, which is wonderful. We've got our airtime traveling back. And it's not just the quantity of time, it's the quality of time, isn't it? We've got more control of what we do. We can take the calls we want, not the ones we don't. It's harder for people to bump down the corridor and interrupt us. And we have fewer unnecessary meetings. Or at least there's that button there, isn't there? You can switch the camera off and catch up with your emails, even if you are in an unnecessary meeting now. It makes it a little bit easier. So productivity is something else that perhaps will improve in the new world. And then a couple of final points. Environment, right? As you said before, think of the carbon footprint if we'd all flown to this. Again, I'm not suggesting you would have flown to see me and Jan, but we do fly a lot to see people when perhaps we don't need to do that. A lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of carbon. And then finally, the stresses. You know, face-to-face, not being face-to-face has its effect on our mental health, as we know. Mixing work with family, on the one hand, is lovely. On the other hand, can bring stress too. And that, again, is a question that affects the way our brains work and mental health. So maybe at that point, I'm going to hand over to Jan, who's going to talk more and dig into our brains on that one.
All right. Thanks very much, Richard. That was great. Why Richard spoke a lot about what will happen in, economy, what is like short term, long term, and what are the opportunities, because we see it obviously, because me and him, we are very optimistic people. So we really see, the glass, half full, not half empty, if you will, right? So I will talk about what we as a human beings and society can do to really improve not our mental health, but to be ready if some crisis will arrive, to be ready in a much better way as opposed to today. Okay. We need to, I will, draw landscape today. We are living in a very different society since 1965. I'll tell you why. Gordon Moore, who was one of the founders in Intel, he basically defined something which is called Moore law. It's not necessarily law, it's a rule. But the rule says basically that every second year, you are doubling capacity of transistors on the chip. He's saying 18 to 24 months, which means you are doubling computing power. Okay? It's exponential. Now, what is the impact on the human lives and human brain? Today, your brain is the same brain like 300-400 years ago. It's the same brain, okay? But your brain today needs to process in 1 week as much as information as the brains of our predecessors for the whole life. Guys, we are living under huge pressure, and we are, fear and, the other things which are bad, like stress, are not killing us. What is killing us is the fact that since, basic school, we are educated what is around us. We are not educated what is inside us. Self-awareness as such is on a very low level. I'm coaching some people who won Olympic Games, and if some other people are asking, what are you doing with them? I'm teaching them how to be not fearful of the fear. Because there's a huge difference if I will say, I have a fear, or I say, I observe my fear. This is very different. If I will say, I observe my fear, I can do something with my fear, because I'm like watching, hey, the fear is here. We are not driven by emotions. We can drive our emotions, but unfortunately, those things are not taught today in the school. Okay, so that's kind of the reality. Huge pressure, school model, which is like 300 years old. There are two institutions which did not change last 300 years: cemetery and school, and I really mean it. Okay, I'm not saying that the school is cemetery, no, but I'm saying they didn't change. Okay, this is it, right? And now, if you think about it, if you take successful and happy people, those are usually people who understand who they are, what are their talents and who they are. They understand their meaning in their life, what they want from the life, and they can decide to use who they are in order to achieve what they want. This is quite easy, but as I said, it's not taught today in the schools. And I think that's something everybody should take care of, but also like the schooling system. It's really self-awareness, because once you are self-aware, you can, fight whatever. Once you have a meaning, Richard, I'm so impressed by Richard. I wanted to say Richard Frankl. No, Viktor Frankl, very famous psychiatrist and psychologist who survived a couple of Nazi camps. He was saying in his book, The Man's Search for Meaning, if you have a meaning in your life, you will survive pretty much everything. Okay. So the meaning is very important. And, if you take COVID, it's obviously health issue, it's logistic issue, but there are two major issues on our health, later on. It's fear and social isolation. Nobody knows exactly how many people will die because of the fear and social isolation as opposed to COVID-19. Because I tell you what, only 1 to 5% of the illnesses are driven by the genes. 90% of the illnesses are driven by the stress. And if you are exposed to the stress for many days, a lot of cortisol is released, your immunity goes down, and then the wrong, mutation of your genes are turned on, and it can have really fatal fatal, impact on you. So that's kind of, in my view, what we need to do. We need to be much more self-aware, and the whole system needs to go and, much more educate people in that sense, because we know so much about the world. We have so little knowledge about us, who we are, right? It's like, I mean, remember those days where you were in the school? Did your teacher ever ask you, what are your talents, or even like, what do you think it's your like meaning? What makes sense? Nobody, right? And unfortunately, this is it, right? So that's first point. The second point on technology. Today, the whole world is driven by exponential. This is the Moore law, doubling computing capacity. But, we are not necessarily, our brains and even our physiology, we are not necessarily ready for that, okay? And that's why people today, because, I mean, if you wanna, in the tough situations, and this is a very tough situation, if you want to be mentally tough, it's all about concentration. Because if you concentrate, you are not fearful. Because once you concentrate, you are here and now. All fears are in the past or in the future, okay? That's where amygdala, the emotional part of the brain is. If you are here and now, and if you concentrate, it's even better if you concentrate on the things where you have like emotional connection to the things you really like, that's even better. And we are back to the meaning of your life, right? So it is about, concentration. And unfortunately, we are so much under focus today, right? So that's another, point with relative to the technology. So we need to, and that's pretty much also on the people like Microsoft, Google, Apple. Why we are teaching people how to use technologies, we should teach people how not to use technologies. Okay, well, I tell you what, it's all about the routines. For example, people what they should do, like half an hour before going to the bed, no technology. Because it's about blue light, it's not good, for your body and for your health, okay? Those things we need to teach, okay? And now what technology is doing in the world, okay? Technology is not changing what is done, but technology is changing rapidly how things are done. Your company, Richard, will still be, Denton still be the law firm, but you will do it in a very different way. We talked before we get connected. I was like, asking Richard how he would rate Denton's, and Denton's is doing quite well compared to the other law firms, as much as digitalization is concerned. Kind of, how you digitalize all processes and so. So the first question is, what will not change, but how your industry will change? This is called, disruptive technologies, disruptive innovation, and so on. The second point, it's relative to the young generation. We have for the first time generation which understands and uses technology in much better way than the current generation. Okay, this will speed up after COVID. This will speed up the whole process, in my view. This will speed up the whole process. And I think if you take schools, kids at home are in the 21st century. Schools are about 17th century. In Anglo-Saxon world, it's factory. In Central Europe, it's pretty much army. And our brain doesn't work like memorizing things. Our brain works on associative way. Our brains learn best through the story. Okay, so the story. If you learn like history, Waterloo, there was a battle by the Waterloo. Okay, so you are sending the signal to your brain. Waterloo, okay, and then in your brain there are like neurons where there is some information on who was there, when was it, and so on. And those neurons are getting connected through the synapses. That's the way you learn. Because if you learn by story, all your senses are involved, and then you are learning in the flow. And McKinsey is saying if you are learning in the flow, your all senses are involved, you are 450% better learner than as opposed, the old method, right? And technology can help with it. I think the learning will be individual. We talked yesterday with Richard on the call, right? That today, every learner is a bit different learner because we have a different talents. We learn in a different way, okay? I'm more like visual guy. My wife is more, learning while reading and so on, right? So technology can help with it. Then learning will be global. I think the kids, they will, make it happen. And it's happening already. The kids will learn around the world. And learning will be also like connecting different boxes. Because, I mean, look, Richard Branson, or in your case, or Bill Gates, they never asked, Richard, did you learn that in math or law or whatever? They just wanted to help, right? Exactly. I was never asked by Gates that, is this coming from the history or the math? No, you wanted to solve it. This is it. And that's the way where you connect, the dots, basically, right? So this is it. And obviously, Richard covered already. So I'm sure we will change the school model, and the work model will change dramatically. And the young generation will drive that. I tell you why. This young generation is much more on experience as opposed on ownership. Okay. So that's why they will, drive those changes, because for them it's easier and there's more freedom if they don't need to sit in the office. Okay. This is it, easy as it is. And I think COVID showed that it's possible. All of those devices like, Zoom, Skype, whatever, it is there. The last point I want to make, it's basically on the fact that, I think people got a lesson from Mother Nature that happiness and meaning in your life is very important. Because there is a lot of people who are successful, but who are not happy. They do things they don't like. They are getting a lot of money. They are getting a lot of money from that activity. So, in fact, it's clear that happiness, if you are happy and you have meaning in your life, those are two big drivers of the performance. Okay, because there was a lot of when Pearson published my book, the Positive Leader, which now it's like 7 different languages. Some people said this is kind of the soft and kind of touchy. I said no. I mean, I did it already in Microsoft, and there were like clear results, because once you find who are your people on one side, okay, and what needs to be done, and you marry it together, like who are your people, what they like to do, and so on, who they are, the talents, and you basically said this is what we need, this is your job. Unfortunately, we are bending people around job descriptions. We need to change it. Bend job description around the people to understand who they are, right? And there are like 4 big points I'm making in the book. And as I said in the invitation, I think book 5 years ago was a little bit ahead of the time, but now a lot of people, I mean, that book is selling still very, very well, especially now in Corona. I'm talking about positive people. Those are people who will find who they are, what are their talents, what they like to do, and so on. So positive people, right? It's called Positive Leader, but everybody can be leader for himself or herself. It's basically about self-awareness, the book. The second, that's the first P, positive people. Second P is positive purpose. Thanks to the talents, if you know who you are, you can easily find what is your purpose, what is your mission here. Okay, so once you know what is your purpose, obviously, you are inspired. That's the second point. And third point is positive process. So you can take decisions to allocate your energies, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, to your, positive purpose. That's the third P. And the last P, if you know who you are, you know what you want from your life, you decide how to allocate your energy. Then you are basically happy and successful at the same point. Because people who are, I mean, Maslow wrote, many books, but he's famous for the pyramid of needs. Okay, Maslow pyramid of needs. At the very peak of that pyramid is self-actualization. Okay, you find something you really like, you have a huge emotional connection to, and it's the same thing with flow. Those things is like the marriage between success and happiness, those two. And if you are able to do it, then you have a meaning, you know who you are, you are taking those decisions, then you are living meaningful, successful, but also happy life. Because a lot of people think that money will bring them happiness. No, happiness is bringing success. This is it, right? I mean, I can obviously talk about the book, more, but I'll quote here Deepak Chopra. He put something on, the cover, and then we will open it for the discussion. He's saying that Positive Leader is a perfect guide that helps unlock greatness in any leader who wishes to be catalyst for the change and transformation. And that's why I want it. It's not like promo, whatever, you know, right? But I try to say that we now need to do a lot of change and a lot of transformation. And people will change, our organizations will change only if they understand who they are, if they know who they are, you know, they will move on. And if they have some meaning, and if you guys on the call, you are some leaders, people will follow you for two reasons. If you help them to understand who they are, that's number one, but it's not enough, right? It's necessary, but not sufficient, as a mathematician, I would tell you. And the second point, you need to inspire them. You need to inspire them by your vision. Vision is the picture of the world, which does not exist yet, but we believe in that picture. And if your people will start to believe in what you believe, and on the journey, they will use their talents, they will follow you even to the hell, right? So, and I think that's what we need. So we need also what we said in terms of the, you know, technology, in terms of the society, economy, in terms of the human beings, but we need to have also strong positive leadership. Positive leadership, a lot of people are accusing me, it's touchy-feely, it's a positive. No, positive leadership, guys, it's about finding best in you, in the other people, putting those things together and be happy, have also very strong results. Now let's open for the questions. Richard, there is a first question. Do you think traveling, especially flying, will be more expensive and more exclusive, like only for somebody? Guys, you can ask questions. I will, you know, read it on my phone.
So, very good question. I've wondered the same thing. I think the configuration actually of fuselages will change to accommodate the pricing and segmentation of the pricing within the cabin. I think, you know, nevertheless, volume is super necessary. As we know, the back of the plane subsidizes the front of the plane and vice versa, depending on how it works. So there will always be both. I think also that, in fact, I know this from talking to a few airlines, is that they simply can't significantly raise the price of what they're doing. Because, of course, the price of what they're doing is entirely dependent on the rest of the economy. And they can't take themselves out of the price point where they are because
there's an interdependence.
It's a bell curve that's very, very steep.
Absolutely.
And if you're outside that bell curve, they can't make it work. I mean, if you take, for example, also frequent flying, I strongly suspect that we all know how difficult it is to get that free ticket with our points or AMRs every time. But we can get it. You know, that will, I'm sure for a while, there'll be a fewer tickets that are available in that way. But I don't think it'll disappear. Just like I don't think that upper class service or first class service or business food will decline significantly, because if it does, the entire product has changed. And whilst, yes, there will be perhaps demand for a slightly different product, when people want to travel, it will be at a price point. I think it's more that there might be less travel, but still at similar price points. But that there is less travel going on, it may be replaced by technological solutions, perhaps. So I don't know if that's good news, but I'm predicting that it won't go up significantly because it'll fall off a cliff even harder if it does.
Yeah, me too. I mean, the economy. Interesting enough, I talked yesterday with my friend from UBS, and we talk about the fact, I mean, stocks went down, now stabilized. It's obvious it's still down year to date. It seems that, you know, they factor in stocks factor in already COVID, but nobody knows what will happen after COVID, exactly what will be the impact, you know, right? Because everybody is, you know, doing a lot of financial support of the economy, like the airlines, you know, airlines are really hit it heavily. Hotels, if you take the whole hospitality business, right? It is a huge, I think some businesses, if you take like, I invested in 2 businesses at the beginning of this year. I didn't know, you know, that COVID will have such impact. It was obviously digital, you know, right? But it was like, okay, because I really believe in those companies, and especially like, you know, Microsoft and other folks, and healthcare also, because I thought, and not necessarily because of the COVID, I didn't know, but because of the, you know, population, which is getting older. And I think so the healthcare and pharma companies will do fine. And those sectors are doing quite well. And as you rightly mentioned, services industry are doing, some services industries are doing also quite well. So guys, if you have I will watch if there is another question. If you have another questions, put it in your in the comment line. We will publish it will be published on this one will be here at the LinkedIn, and probably we will put it also on YouTube if the quality is good. We will put it on the YouTube. Richard, one point, because you are quite close, your heart is quite close to places like Africa, where you spend some time on charity work and so on. There's a discussion around COVID about, you know, big countries, large countries, developed countries, but very little about, you know, countries in Africa or some Asian countries. What do you think how they will, you know, cope with it?
Well, I talked to some friends actually, actually both in Nigeria and in Mumbai recently as well. And of course, Mumbai is a slightly different proposition to other parts because it's already very developed. But there are parts of India that, of course, still have a very, very densely populated and poverty-stricken areas. And you know, the view there, of course, is that, you know, social distancing is a luxury. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
We're suffering from it, but of course, as we know, it's just not an option. And the other thing that's quite sad is that, and I don't know how other people feel who are listening to this and have no doubt got their own experience of talking to people in these situations. It's just one more thing amongst so many in those places, that the significance actually of this killer disease in the lives of the people in these places is so minimal compared to ours. And I don't want to say this is trouble in paradise, because it isn't, but there is some perspective to be had.
I think you are spot on. This is very much what, as you know, Bill Gates is very, very involved in Africa. And he delivered that talk 5 years ago.
Yes.
Where he basically said what needs to be done, nothing was done, and here is it. Tomáš Tsar, here is asking question, you know, thank you for inspiring thoughts. If you can tell him if there are some tricks how to not, if you are at home, how to not mix like home and work together. I mean, you know, kids and so on. And you know, you tell him some things, and I'll give him also some tips, you know, right?
Okay, number one, noise cancelling earphones, right? Number one. Okay.
Technology.
Absolutely, right. Number two, of course, it is down to, again, a question of the luxury of whether you have space or not.
Sure.
And number three is some structure to the day. I'm sure everybody knows this. My wife laughs at me because our bedrooms are actually downstairs here. I've been banished to the living room because my kids are homeschooling in my study, so I can't go in there anymore. It's the only place we've got to study. It's driving me nuts, but that's another question. But yeah, tip two, buy two printers, actually. But my wife laughs at me because every evening I go downstairs to the bedroom and I've got so much kit up here, you know, cables and phones and computers and laptops and cancelling headphones and all the rest of it. But I have to pack it all up in my briefcase. And my briefcase goes home with me at night from this room downstairs into the bedroom. And in the morning, I take my briefcase and I walk it back upstairs. And she laughs at me and says, "You're commuting." And basically my commute is upstairs, but it's true. And there is actually some seriousness in that, which is, I'm sure lots of other people have the same view and have discovered the same thing, but some proper structure to your day. And actually, I'm one of the few that actually does shave every day, because I think if I don't, you know, I've seen people who are like coming out like the Bee Gees now, you know, it's not good. I mean, good for them, you know, if it makes them happy. But I think that feeling of now I'm at work, you know, it's in your head. It's back to Jan stuff. It's what's in your head,
exactly,
not what's around you. And I think if you can segment your day within your mindset a little as well as using technology, that's my tip for survival. Also, stay away from the fridge.
Perfect. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I would say, because as I said, you know, there are two things: fear and social isolation. So I'll give a couple of more tips, right? For the fear, do things you really, you know, like and you can concentrate on, because a lot of endorphin is released and you feel good, you know, right? That's one point. Then Richard rightly said, you need to have kind of the schedule plan and tell. For me, in my case, I'm telling my wife, hey, this is it. Those are points. I do webinar after you guys. I have like lunch. Then I have all coaches of the best Czech soccer club, Slavia Prague, for 2 hours, here, right? So my wife knows exactly where I can do something on the garden or something else. Okay, so this is important. So schedule is important, because once you are like finishing some task, then dopamine is released and you feel good, right? It's like mentally checking out. And then what Richard said, even if you talk to somebody through the screen, it's still, better than nothing, right? Because serotonin is released. For example, if you are writing us here, like, thank you very much for your visions and contributions, that's great. Serotonin is released, and me and Richard, we feel good. And then if you help people, and we try to help because we have like nothing for this, and we will, share it with everybody, oxytocin, which is the chemical for trust, is released. So you feel very good. I give you one example. In the UK, every Thursday afternoon or whatever, they will go to the balcony and clap their hands. Is that true, Richard?
Yeah, and I think it's in many countries actually. Yeah, but here they do. Absolutely, we do.
To really thank to the doctors, nurses, and people who are really working. My daughter, she is, in London. I have an apartment in London, so she is doing that, right? The other thing, which is quite interesting. My daughter is also a lawyer. She works. Richard is kind of, mentor of Christina, right? She works for the different company. But what they are doing, for example, they've got a boss, and they have like virtual lunch together, like for 1 hour, everybody's eating, and they see each other, they talk, which I think it's nice, And 5 o'clock they have a virtual tea, which again, it's a good thing how to get people together, because we basically, Richard, in Czech Republic, there's a mandatory to wear a mask. Okay.
Yeah.
And when it started, there were no masks. So people were really preparing it at home and so on. So nobody knows exactly what is the impact of the mask. Probably it's good, but some countries are not using it anyway. But in general, the mask started to be kind of the, symbol of the Czech getting together, Czech people getting to, what I mean, right? Yeah. Even old, ladies, they were doing those masks and so on. So it was very nice. And I think that's probably another good thing. Like what Nietzsche was saying, what is not killing us will strengthen us, right? Richard, do you think that crisis will impact working hours? What is your opinion on working here? Probably meant for working day week. Working only if there be some impact.
So no, actually, Parkinson's law, isn't it? Work expands to fill the time available, and there's always 24 hours in the day. So I think just like when we thought we'd have a paperless society when word processing was invented, and actually now we've destroyed more rainforests than ever before. I think that the human being is just built to fill. Partly, actually, for the reasons that Jan was just expressing, we need to be constantly active. That's my view, and therefore work actually will continue. But I think it's the quality of the hours we spend, which I hope will improve. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure the quantity will change, because I remember my father back in the 14th century when I was a kid telling me that when technology, which probably meant a washing machine in those days, was coming, that we'd all have much more leisure time. We didn't. My generation has worked much harder than his generation, and I suspect the generation under me is now working much harder than me. So I don't think so. And I'll come to 4-day week in a minute as well. I could be wrong, and in many ways I really hope I am, but I just haven't seen it, and I don't think we're going to see it. But I hope the quality, how we spend those hours working, will change. And I also hope that we will recognize, I think we will actually through this crisis more than ever, the unnecessary time that is spent at the office doing unnecessary tasks, looking useful, and all those things that are just actually are a waste of time and don't give us the oxytocin and serotonin that we need, because they're not satisfying anyway. So I think we'll fill the time. and I really hope we'll do it in a more useful way. I'll give you just one last example, and then I'll come to 4 day week, I promise, is there's a very good technology out there for doing due diligence in merger and acquisition transactions. There's a few actually, and they come to us and they say, look, you know, we don't want to get rid of lawyers. Don't worry, we just want to help. And I always say to them, guys, you got your pitch wrong. I want you to get rid of lawyers, right? We've got too many people in the back office costing a lot of money, bored out of their minds, sifting through boxes of documents, okay? They don't want to do that, and I don't want to pay them to do that, right? Give me your technology so that I can possibly hire fewer people to do that, but still hire more people to run the technology. The people who are doing the due diligence with the help of your technology will be engaged and interested because now they're doing the really valuable stuff that only humans can do. And the other people I can employ to improve the technology. Yeah. So I'm hoping quality to improve. 4 day weeks. We've actually just imposed that in my business simply because we're going to have a financially tough year. And what we've actually done is say 80% time rather than 4 day week. Because obviously in some situations, it's not practical to say I won't be in the office on Friday when something has a continuum. So what we're doing on that is saying 80% time, but you can use it how you like. You can do 6 days a week and take a month off later, or you can do 4 days or whatever it is. Do I think it'll come universally? I don't. I think we'll be going back. The other thing that was interesting is we had to ask people, we have about 14,000 people across the world. We had to ask people to voluntarily accept this, understanding that the employers in the business, the stakeholders would be, of course, suffering financially more than them, because otherwise why should they voluntarily accept it? And we were lucky they did voluntarily accept it. But interestingly, it's not what they want. You know, they're doing it because they're doing it. They're getting paid a little less because of it. Sure. But they're ambitious, like everyone is. They want to be occupied. And so they want to get back to five or more days a week with the pay that goes with it, and the ambition and satisfaction and oxytocin and serotonin that goes with it. That's my view.
Yeah. There's a following question from Zuzana Molchanova on the fact that she is saying that basically I'm scheduling everything. I try to be very productive. It's still like 12 hours of work, you know, overwhelmed, and then you know, basically exhausted from the customers and so on. So here is the point, guys. Our brain is a huge chemical factory, okay? And if you do a good job with your brain, which means like you do things you like, you know, with the people you like and so on, majority of the time, good chemicals like serotonin, oxytocin, you know, endorphin, if you are in the flow, is released. And it has a huge impact on your body and on your mental health. If you do something you don't like, right, then a lot of cortisol is released, and it has a bad impact not only on your brain but also on your body, on the physiology. There's a great book from my friend Bruce Lipton, is in epigenetics, and the name of the book is Biology of Belief, where he spoke exactly that our thoughts are creating our life. Now, saying that, Zuzana, maybe there are two options, okay? Maybe you don't like that job anymore. It can be, okay? And then I would probably think long-term how to change the job. If you like the job and you are still exhausted, right? And it can be, right, that you are exhausted even though you like it. I tell you what, you guys, some of you who knows me, probably that 8 years ago, I've got a deep depression, okay? I was not depressed, because a lot of people think you can be depressed only from the work you hate. No, I was depressed from the work I love. Because if you are in the flow, if you like what you do, okay, endorphin, dopamine, oxytocin, all of those good chemicals are released, but you need to take some time during the sleep and recovery to basically clean your brain. If you are not, having mental rest, I was having physical rest. I'm talking about mental rest. Majority of the leaders and managers are not having enough mental rest, okay? Then, the cortisol step by step is going to your body. My depression didn't start here. It started in my body, in my back. I've got a pain in my back, in my belly, okay? So if you still like the job, you need to take care of yourself, and you need to have, mental health. point, right? 12 hours, it's a lot, but then you need to have, like do some meditation, yoga, tai chi, simply things where you are absolutely disconnected from the world. Otherwise, I have this experience. It almost cost me my life 8 years ago. This is it. That's how it works. I even put it on in the book. So I don't know if you have because a lot of lawyers are working, long hours, right?
Yes. But that's their problem. They are, but these days I don't have much sympathy. We chose the job, right? So, yeah, but I think a couple of observations I fully endorse and agree with. First thing is, of course, look after your physical self, and I think just getting out with your mask or whatever you have to do and walking around the block. I know that's like really obvious, but boy, is it! I guess it's part of that structure. I actually put in 2 walks a day in my structure. I'm just not available. Okay, no one's going to die. Life goes on. The calls will still be there when I get back. So that's the first thing. Exercise. The second thing is, this may sound like a funny one, a bit counterintuitive, but you mentioned Susanna. Was it Susanna? Sorry, was it Susanna?
Yeah, Susanna.
You mentioned
she said that she loves the job, so it's really like having a rest.
Good.
That's good.
You mentioned customers, right? Well, most of us all got customers or clients and all the rest of it. Look, I got to be honest with you, and maybe that's what you're feeling. They're very, very demanding in situations like this, and it can be very exhausting, and it can sometimes be very irritating, actually. And one of the things that I sometimes do, as politely as I can, is sometimes remind people that we're working for, that we're not a charity, we are a business. We're also a business like them. And we're quite a precarious business. I don't know what business you're in, Susanna. This is the 3rd global crisis I've been through. In the last 2, we literally nearly went bankrupt. So I'm completely used to how it goes. And sometimes it is worth, in my view, politely, graciously, courteously explaining to people what's going on in your business, because it's probably just as painful or worse than what's going in their business. Now, they may not care because they're paying for a service, but actually I found that if you get down into the pit with them and just let them understand that you're not washing around in champagne and Learjets, and you too and your people are suffering, sometimes, that eases some of the pressures and demands and, wakes them up a bit.
Richard, there is a question from Peter Sinski on interim management. If you think that the period after COVID will be the good, at least for some time, for the interim managers.
Quite likely. I think my experience of what's going on now amongst business leaders that I'm talking to, and I appreciate that I have a very narrow view of the wider economy, but speak to many in many sectors, is that a lot of people are trying very hard not to make redundancies here. What they're doing, for example, let's go back to Susanna's point about the previous question about 4-day week. Lots of businesses are cutting down the amount of time people work, are furloughing people, are doing other things, seconding people, whatever it is, so that when this hopefully very sharp V-shaped recovery comes,
right,
we're not all scrabbling desperately around to rebuild the businesses to meet the demand that's going to come suddenly. And I think that is different to the last crisis, which was an L shape, as we know, and went for a long time. And we're going to have a double dip here, there's no doubt, but the recovery is probably going to be pretty fast in some places. And I think certainly speaking to business leaders and our own business, the people I think are very keen not to offload people, which would need interim management later, such that they then have to get interim management, which is quite expensive, and then also rehire, which is extremely expensive. But yes, I'm sure there's going to be a need. If that's what your gig is, I'm sure you're going to be in demand nevertheless.
There is a question on HR from Dan Heller. What are major long-term HR transformation you foresee in the near future as a response to the new norm? How will organizational culture have to change, if at all? I was starting, because I work a lot with HR folks, and I coach some people who are running really large businesses like big banks and big here in Czech Republic, for example, Diana Regerova, she's running Deloitte's like 1,200 people. I think first of all, it would need to go really and figure out how you will do that system, which is based on the strengths of your own people. This is not young bullshit. These are really real numbers, okay? Shell did a couple of years ago some study. They asked a big question, you know, right? What does it take to be for 200 years among top 5 companies in the world? You know what they figured out? In the only long-term competitive advantage, which is really strong and sustainable, is your ability to learn fast, okay? The ability to learn fast. And ability of the organization is basically consists of the ability of all individuals, which means those organizations which will be able to unlock human potential, which will use the best in the people, will learn faster because you are learning fastest if your people are in the flow. If they use who they are and they love what they do, they have an emotional connection to their jobs, you know, right? Then you don't need to do anything, right? That's kind of the vision, okay? That's the co-vision. What is the reality? According to Gallup, a friend of mine, Jim Clifton, who is running Gallup, okay? I helped him to, launch his book. It's a manager here in Europe in December. We spoke together in London. And they published recently study. It shows that only 14% of the people around the world are self-actualized, which means that 86% of the people are doing jobs they hate, basically. 42% are even, they call it actively disengaged, right? Engaged people, they working all the time. You don't need to be there, whatever. Actively disengaged people, it's like infection. They getting up in the morning, they are pissed off, and they go to the office to piss off other people, okay? And it's like infection. That's the reality. So there's a way to go, but I think the human being, like, you know, what will you do with the people? Because there's a lot of CEOs who will tell you, people are the most, I was also CEO, right? People are the most important asset for the company. This is halfway true. Your people, talents, and strengths are the most important asset for the company. And you, CEO, you unlock those assets or not. It's really up to you, right? And I think for the future, CEO means not only Chief Executive Officer, but it means also Chief Enthusiasm Officer. And the enthusiasm is about energy and inspiration, right? Those two. E, if you take EI, emotional intelligence, right? This is it. So, Richard, what would you add? And we need to wrap up because we are over 1 hour.
Very quickly. Okay, so I think flexi time, obviously, there's going to be more flexible working, mental health. Okay, I think there's really is going to be, I mean, it started, thank God, but I think this will accelerate the focus on people's mental health, right, and bring it out of the darkness into the light, cherish and nurture that side of people's humanity and working capability. I really think that will happen, and I embrace it fully. And part of that is being able to work more flexibly and to have better quality work, as we were saying earlier, even if the quantity is as much. So that's what I think HR should be, and I think will be actually concentrating on.
Perfect. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, thanks very much for your attention. Richard, thank you very much for great discussion we've got. And as we are saying, you know, co-vision is opportunity from adversity, right? I mean, people, the mental toughness, whether it's human being or the whole organization, is the ability to work to really have a good performance even during tough times. Exactly, right? And, you know, once you have a meaning in your life, once you are, you know, happy, whatever will happen, you will always find the way, right? Because you will understand who you are, you will understand where you want to go, and then you will decide. And I think both me and Richard, we, you know, show you some opportunities and what can happen, and take it. I always take a change, and transformation is a huge opportunity to do something different. For example, what I do, guys, my, you know, income now for 2 months is very little. I mean, some webinars, but it's very little. But what I do, I try to help people how to fight fear. That's my first now for 2 months. That's my first mission, what I do. And why I do it, I wanted to help them because it's kind of my meaning is to help other people, meaning A. And B, if you guys are like writing me, hey, thanks very much, It's good for my brain. It's good for my immunity. So it's a win-win. So Richard, the floor is yours for the kind of the wrap-up.
Guys, it's been a real privilege to be on this. Jan, it's been lovely to work with you. Everybody, these are difficult times, and we don't, as I say, belittle them, but there's opportunity out there, and it's just lovely that people are engaging with it and happy to see that with us. So thank you, and be happy, be safe.
Thank you.
And as Jan said, happiness drives success.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Thank you.